more you engage and understand your own chart and what's happening in the world and how that affects our energetic body, the more empowered we feel. You know, it's all part of being human and having the human experience, and our souls know what they're doing. We just have to quiet the mind and quiet the ego in order to be able to listen to it. That's a lot of what astrology provides us.
Welcome to the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As a leading manifestation advisor with a process that's, well, radically different from the old New Age model, mine is rooted in psychology, neuroscience, and my energetic gifts. I created this podcast to help you expand your subconscious limiting beliefs about the potential of deserving the manifestations you're calling in. Therefore, you're tuning into this podcast series to show your subconscious that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, you've already started the process of manifesting it. Happy Friday, everybody. So I've just returned back from a week back east on a little business trip. I was officially looking at the retreat house that I've had my eye on for quite some time. But the really cool thing is I had originally put an offer in back in May, and I could see where the price needed to be. And so it's really interesting because after that series of eclipses and everything I think a lot of us have been doing through this time, may it be in blocking, expanding, really finding our own new threshold of where our trust is. I think that's been the true teaching of COVID. As I said from the very top, if you didn't hear the way to navigate COVID and the energetics of COVID, we have that linked below. They are still just as applicable today as they were then. So I've been on my own journey as well as collectively as a company we have been. And it was really cool because once those eclipses came to an end, I had a feeling I was like, okay, I navigated all of that. We did as a brand, and I think individually, each of our teammates were on their own journeys, and I think they navigated really well. And it was so poignant that the realtor texted me right when I was sort of having this epiphany and said that the sellers were willing to come to the price, very close to the price I had initially offered on. So I headed back and really got a feel for everything, and we'll kind of see where it all goes. But needless to say, it was really excellent to be back east. I was really safe in traveling. I must have looked really funny because with a mask, I always fly with my Blue Blocks little sleep mask as well to sleep on the plane. So I was like masked with those Blue Blocks sleep goggles, and I was cracking up at that. But for anybody who doesn't know about those are a lifesaver. I use them every night. I think many of you in this brand also are probably using the Blue Blocks products due to how much I talk about them. If you're not familiar, for anybody who is just as blue light geeked out as I am, they do have new light bulbs, the Lumi light bulbs. So I travel with them. So I'm kind of crazy. I travel with candles. Once I arrive, I'll usually pop into a Whole Foods or whatever, and I'll grab some glass candles so that they're safe. And I'll have those wherever I'm staying with me, along with a couple of light bulbs. So I just don't have the crazy blueness. So I can keep my circadian rhythm, especially if I'm jumping 3 hours ahead. Sleep right now for me has been very important. So those are some key little tips. And if you haven't heard the 2 episodes we have with the founder of Blue Blocks, Andy Mant, they're linked below. It goes really in depth of your circadian rhythm, of why it's so important to protect against blue lights in the evening, especially. And yeah, that's kind of the little gist that I do when I travel, but I'm still laughing at the image of being on a plane and doing the mask with the eye mask. So really exciting. We have our 4th coach that we've just announced this month. We've been so looking forward to her. You've heard her before, as you have with every one of our other coaches, as a process guest, Sawa Chobe. Definitely give her prior episode a listen if you haven't. It's super expansive. She's a projector. I knew right on the dot when I heard her. I was like, She would make an excellent coach, as did Amanda. So she's been in some pretty rigorous training. And we're just, excited to have her on board. So do check her out below. She's also partaking in the question service that we launched this month that has just been getting tremendous feedback. We could almost start a motivation, the portal that we keep all of our testimonies in, alone for this question service, for all of the feedback we've received that's positive and how much it far surpassed anyone's expectations. So if you're unfamiliar, the service is that it's $25. You can ask any question you're having pertaining to manifestation or your practice or anything to do with things you've heard on this podcast about manifestation. Pathway members, anyone can ask, and you submit it. It's a pretty detailed form so that the coaches can really read the energetics, and you'll receive back a 2 to 5 minute voice note from them where they read your energetics. They tell you the next steps you need to take, the action steps, as well as how to navigate the work and the pathway specific to the question you've asked. So it's been tremendous. And now Sawa is also contributing to that. So do check her out. So excited for everything to come with these coaches. On the note of the eclipses, which everybody, I'm sure, felt very strongly, and everything else that's astrologically been happening this year, and it's no coincidence that many of the trials and tribulations we've seen highlighted this year certainly follow astrological patterning as well. And I'm lucky enough to be able to do hikes in the morning. My psychological astrologer, Danielle Beinstein, lives in Topanga. And so we'll go on walks and I can pick her brain about what's happening. And I was like, whoa, this is so selfish. I have to share her with you guys. So she has been on here before, 3 episodes. If you have not heard her first 2, they are so tremendously insightful for anybody who's curious about astrology, who's new to astrology. She really breaks it down. One of them in particular, we truly break down where manifestation and astrology meet. So I've asked her back to really highlight the rest of the year and what we have to look forward to. May it be retrogrades, may it be month to month, when things are going to let up a little bit. So she gives us a really in-depth episode here of what we can expect for the rest of the year moving into early next year. If you're unfamiliar, she is a psychological astrologer. She graduated from NYU with a BA in Humanities in 2003, then received her MA in spiritual psychology in 2012, followed by an additional training year in consciousness, health, and healing. And I'd be surprised if maybe 60% of you haven't already worked with her. So probably a further introduction isn't needed. So I'm going to stop babbling and get right into this episode so we can all pull back the veil to see how we can dance with the cosmic energies of the rest of the year in order to find our flow. Dani, welcome back. You've been on the podcast a couple of times before, and I personally want to know, what the fuck else does 2020 have in store for us? But before we kick into that, I thought it would be great if you wanted to sort of surmise in a bubble what it has been so far. And you're so familiar with this work in this community through the lens of self-worth, authenticity, unblocking, all of that. Let us know sort of what has gone on so far in 2020 and how it's matched up with everything that we're experiencing.
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here again. And I obviously love your community. So thank you so much for having me back. So this year, any astrologer, I'm not special, any astrologer would have told you that 2020 was a major, major game changer. And a lot of that is kind of a breakdown of the structures that be. So especially for To Be Magnetic participants and pathway members, it's like really understanding that giving your authority away to a structure or an entity or an organization, that's coming to an end. And that is really, to me, the core of what we're seeing, right? We're seeing kind of this breakdown of the establishment. You know, there's this really kind of interesting paradox, especially in 2021, as we move into more Aquarius energy out of the Capricorn, because Capricorn deals a lot with structure and order, establishment, history, and Aquarius is all the new, right? So Aquarius has kind of this paradox, which is both about the individual and then the collective. So it's the idea that the more we liberate ourselves as individuals, the more the collective is liberated. January 12th was a really important signature in the sky. And it's because Saturn, which takes about 28 and a half years to go around the zodiac, we talk about the Saturn return, which is when Saturn returns to the point it was at our birth. We experience an up leveling or a real kind of gateway into maturation and adulthood. We start making real decisions for our future that have consequence. So we see a lot of people making major life moves at around the age of 29. And then Pluto, much longer, that takes about 248 years. And they met up at the exact degree of 22 degrees on January 12th in Capricorn, all about the breakdown of structure. If you think about the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, Pluto was in Capricorn at the signing of that. And then we're in the Saturn return of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So you can kind of take those two energetic imprints, place them together, and you see what we have, which is kind of like a global breakdown. How that affects the individual is a core liberation and going, well, what's my backbone in all of this? Where's my integrity? What really do I desire for my life? And so a lot of times we think, oh my God, if our life isn't going in the plan that we have and we don't see immediate results and things are derailed, many of us, because we're in catastrophic thinking or fear thinking, and we just have that human default of, it's like we don't see that our futures aren't being blocked. Our destiny is unfolding, and it's not an either or, it's all together. And so if we're not in resistance to what's happening, but we see it as a kind of redirect, then I think we have an opportunity to really build up our grit and our resilience and our own fortitude, and to really step into that idea of the magic dark, as you say. It's like, just because it's not showing up right now doesn't mean that things aren't being rearranged in the cosmos in service to our own growth. So I think the big thing is looking at how we jump to fear, but really how things very well may be working out in our favor over the long term. And of course, people are going to be experiencing loss, but that's always the case, right? I think that there's this idea sometimes that, like, because the 24-hour news cycle and this idea that waking up fear so that we become, more and more addicted to watching the news and its infotainment and all of that, that we lose sight of like our own inner knowing. I cannot tell you how many of my clients, I would say much larger portion than I really ever would have imagined, are making major life moves, like moving across the country, moving across the globe, even in the middle of a pandemic. So there is a core redirect that I'm seeing.
So if we get into, what you just touched on with the two planets coming
conjunct. So basically they met up at the exact same degree.
Right. And we obviously kind of all have an idea of how that's played out collectively, in the news, in current affairs. But bringing it back down to the individual, the Aquarian in me, as you talk about 2021, and how you're saying that basically there's an unfolding happening for all of us, and that it may be putting us into somewhat of a magic dark in different shades, different spectrums. Can you bring that down just a little bit more of how ways that can be showing up for different individuals and how they could be navigating that? They obviously have these tools that you're familiar with, but yeah, just to anchor that further for the person listening.
So I'm seeing examples of people wanting to sell their house, there being issues in escrow, the sale not going through, and then, for example, there being a waiting or a magic dark, to use your terminology, for the right house, the more of the match. There's that example. There's issues, people trying to get pregnant where they thought they'd want to get pregnant previously, but then it actually lines up perfectly that they end up getting pregnant in perfect alignment with that soul's journey. There's examples of people wanting to move abroad and their passport being caught in the backlog, but then trusting that if that move is meant to happen, it's going to happen in divine timing in an even better way than one could have imagined.
Yeah. And similarly to those who have lost their jobs, potentially not being on their authentic path, and not in a scary way, just like you're saying that their soul may have a different plan than their mind or their timeline or whatever. And even greater divinity is actually, it's sort of like a scrambled egg is happening
Yeah.
throughout this experience to create a really beautiful omelet. It feels like you're in a scramble, but in fact, there will be this, incredible ending point for your soul.
Or it's like, you can think of it as like an impressionist painting, right? You look at it super close and you're like, what is this? And you step far enough away and you're like, oh, this is a beautiful garden or a beautiful flower or a beautiful picnic scene, right? It's the same thing. It's like, how wide angle is our lens? How close up are we seeing the thing? And are we stepping back and letting the events unfold? And I think a lot of what's unfolding also is, learning to bear witness to what is without immediately stepping into judgment. Because when we're in that energetic space, then the solutions come. Because when we're in the fear and the panic, we often don't come up with the solutions, or they don't present themselves because we're coming from that fear-based place. And so we don't have the peripheral vision that can bring the unexpected result.
And something I've seen come up to exactly what you're saying is, and I want to get further deep into the retrogrades in a minute, which I think will explain this further. But I think a lot of people are being hit and have been hit throughout the year with wave after wave after wave after wave, which we can all agree is, I think, creating trauma for people. However, a lot of superstition can be attached to that, right? When one thing after another that's painful or shameful or hard or scary is happening to you or out of the plan that you might have had, one can say, how am I attracting this? Or I must be bad, or I'm having bad luck, or X, Y, and Z. When in reality, what's really happening, it sounds like, is that like incredible blessings are happening for you and really amazing support. Though you can't see it right now, you're actually being more held than ever and guided onto the right path for the right timing. And that this is a beautiful opportunity for that. But the humanistic person in us who's in a body is like grasping on for dear life and just trying to stay afloat.
Yeah, I think of like the Tower card in the tarot, or, the idea that destruction and chaos are linked to creativity. This idea that sometimes things have to fall down and fall apart. And it's almost like when you unspool that thread, it's not just that one piece that gets unspooled, but sometimes the whole sweater starts to come unraveled. But then you're left with the thread itself, and then you can reknit what feels more right to you. That too, it's like, again, we go into this idea of, oh my God, this is falling apart. This is falling apart. But in that, there's all these possibilities for new beginnings. And it's like, really, how do we relate to change? How do we relate to new beginnings? And this desire to know. When we live in that place, we're missing out on the magic and the wonder. And I don't mean that in a pat way. Like, I recognize that people are really struggling. Listen, my dad lost his best friend of 70 plus years. He's devastated. My mom was in the hospital with this disease. Like, I thought my life was going to go a whole other way. And it's not like, I'm not trying to make light of it in any way, shape, or form. These are really real things, but we don't walk through this life unscathed, and we don't build our self-esteem by walking through the life unscathed. How we find our own sense of self, our own destiny, our own unfolding is through navigating these things, with all the tools available. So I'm not trying to paint a picture where it's like, it's all just a rainbow at the end, but more this idea that it's all part of, Nora Ephron, the writer, famously said, like, everything is copy. Everything becomes the story. And it's like, what's the narrative that you're going to construct around what's happening? Because that will really create your experience through this.
I've been saying throughout this whole time that the energetics and manifestation, that people are in one of these three phases and they probably oscillate between them. But, like our course up level right now, it's either rock bottom, next level, or the rut, and I think that we're being so divinely supported to knock us out of one and the other into the third. Luckily, that tool exists. But what are your favorite tools around change when you're in the depths of it and it's all so unearthing? What do you love to do?
I mean, I always follow the cycles of the moon because that brings me to the present, to what is. And I think sometimes what's happening can be so overwhelming that it's like to earth or to ground or to stay in the moment or to connect to nature or to connect, I love to read. That's one of my favorite pastimes. And even just, I love language and I love literature. And so for me, it's like finding beauty where I can find beauty in the small ways. So the cup of tea, a beautifully crafted sentence, and then helping myself through it all through, your work and then the moon cycles, really the new moon and the full moon, and then using both those periods. There's a new moon and a full moon in each lunar cycle, starting, with the new moon and the kind of planting of seeds of how I want to show up and how I want to experience this next month and what energetic experiences I want to cultivate. And because I'm a non-specific manifester, it shows up, I can't get too specific about what I want to manifest, but then in the full moon, really kind of coming into that feeling of, okay, this is what's come forward, paying attention to what's being illuminated, what awarenesses are coming forward. So I feel like that's what's in my wheelhouse and what I come back to again and again and again. But then if I'm feeling real resistance, I do this thing called free form writing, where I just write out all of my feelings as if I'm a 5-year-old, really. Like it looks like a bad finger paint job. Like it is just like all over the place. And then I just burn it and I let it go. And I do that again and again and again. And then sometimes I'll work with a specific prompt, if I'm working through something. And, I've gotten really good throughout my journey with all of this in sitting with the unknown until I have clarity and not forcing clarity before it's ready to emerge.
Love it. So getting into the retrogrades we're currently experiencing, obviously we're so grateful Venus got back on track. We had that, wonderful Mercury cycle. What do we have going on right now? And what do we have to look forward to for the rest of the year in terms of retrogrades? And what do they mean?
Okay, so Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion and growth and where we feel that sense of possibility, that's retrograde in Capricorn. Saturn, which is a planet of structure, so our physical world reality, any karmic lessons, that's retrograde in Capricorn right now. And then Pluto, which is transformation, again, that destruction, chaos, birthing anew, that's also retrograde. But here's the good news. September 12th, Jupiter goes direct. September 28th, Saturn goes direct. And then October 4th, Pluto goes direct. So we have that. That being said, it's going to retrace its steps. So we may see a reemergence of COVID, but we're going to be on a forward track with all of that. Here's the thing though. Mars, which is the planet of action and forward movement, it on June 28th moved into Aries and it's going to stay there. This is not usual. This is because of a retrograde. It's going to stay there all the way till January 6th of 2021. It's going to retrograde September 9th to November 13th. So we're going to have that. And then we have Mercury retrograde October 13th to November 3rd.
So it sounds like kind of after the election, things mellow out just a tiny bit. We still have that Mars and Aries situation, but it sounds like things will start to mellow a little for us.
Yes, especially because I think that's absolutely accurate, because I think we're going to feel the most intense energy between October 9th and October 20th, when there's going to be what's called a cardinal T-square in the sky. So you're going to have the sun is going to be in Libra, Mars is going to be in Aries, and then it's going to be squaring all of that Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter energy in Capricorn. So I think that's when we're going to feel, that's the next kind of iteration of feeling like we're in a grind. But again, it's like if we can sit with it and pay witness to it, I do think you're right. I do think after the election, we are going to feel some
release.
So yeah, some release. Exactly.
So not to beat a dead horse, but let's say, okay, I just want to share with people how this could be affecting them directly or how it has throughout the year with the ones that are currently still retrograding. So when Saturn's in retrograde, I know you explained sort of what it harnesses, but how could people be experiencing that and how could they have been experiencing it throughout the year? And what are some tools around it?
So, each of these, each of the Jupiter, the Saturn, and the Pluto retrograde in of themselves, that happens pretty much yearly. So it's not that each of them is necessarily retrograde. It's that all three are, right? And that all three are in Capricorn. So for those of you who are studying astrology, you want to look to where late degree Capricorn is in your chart, because that's where you're going to be feeling like, oh, my forward movement in terms of these karmic lessons or in terms of structural advancement is being held back. So it's more along the lines of like, because we're dealing with Capricorn in this, it's like structural, government, maybe even larger transactions around money in terms of big moves, things like that. I see people also like moving back home to if they're from another country, they're moving to a native country. It's like a return to. And I think the way that it may be showing up in terms of our own lives is feeling like it's coming, but not yet.
Oh, you mean like even in terms of manifestation?
Yes, like we know it's coming, we can feel it, but just not yet. Just not yet.
That forward motion.
Exactly. So I think it just feels like a little bit of a blockade in whatever area of your chart or life that's showing up, but it's not a forever thing. We're at the tail end of these retrogrades because, I mean, we're already in August.
Yeah.
I can't believe it, but we're already in August. It's like anything, right? Especially here in America, like there's not a lot of movement for a lot of people, meaning that even if they're living their daily lives, they feel obstructed in some way because our daily life has not fully resumed yet. And so I think it can show up both in like the frustration of just wanting to go sit in a cafe and have a normal, quote unquote, normal experience, to feeling like, wait, I want to sell my house and it's not selling. Like it can run the spectrum, and it's so specific to the individual chart that I don't want to make a huge generalization. What I feel like I can say with confidence is that almost every single person is feeling the touch of destiny or fate. And I don't mean that in a fatalistic way, like in a negative way, but they're feeling the hand of the multidimensional aspect of life.
So you mean like they're feeling into a little bit of the magic. They just don't feel like it's moving towards them quick enough.
Exactly. I think that, I feel that that's available to anyone. And I think a lot of what's happening is people had very specific plans for 2020. And those plans, obviously, for most people, they didn't take place, but then new plans are emerging that one never would have conceived of.
What's so interesting? I've seen it quite a bit. In fact, I could even speak to this personally. The plans that I had on a timeline that I'm manifesting this year are all happening. But just as you expressed earlier, they're all happening in a different way at a different time in an even better, more supported way than I had anticipated. And I've certainly had my moments of like, fuck, is this not going to happen? Or have I not learned the lesson here, or the test, or the whatever? And it actually hasn't fully come down to that as much as exactly what you're saying, the surrender process in the magic dark and letting it all unfold in an even more divine way, the way it's supposed to.
Exactly. So I'll give an example, right? Let's say someone was a waitress, and let's say they were doing okay, but they weren't at the top restaurant, making a killing on tips, and they didn't want to be a waitress, right? So the pandemic hits and they're able to actually get unemployment, and unemployment actually was paying them more than they had been making as a waitress. And this allows them to then redirect towards the career that they had envisioned. And they may not be able to start at the pace that they had expected, but there was that kind of divine intervention. And I'm actually seeing quite a bit of that example where there actually is support that's shown up. It's just shown up in a way that felt unexpected.
Absolutely.
So I also don't want to give into this idea that not everybody is struggling. Some people are, but just like in life, always, some people are actually experiencing more abundance than they had anticipated.
Yeah. And that's what I've been expressing. We're totally aligned in the energetic since the very beginning of what this is all about for all of us. And it really is just what you surmised. And so getting into, we get to look forward to these three planets, coming back to their natural cycle, or how do you say that?
Just going direct. It's like, yeah. So they're going to retrace that. But it's like forward momentum. It's the feeling of moving forward. It's the feeling of the next step of clarity. Because I also think, one of the experiences that I have in manifestation is when I try and plot out the whole thing, all the steps, strategically thinking far in advance, it never works. But if I go, what's the yellow brick right in front of me? And I take that step, then it unfolds as it's meant to. And so I think that's the deep lesson here as well, is like, okay, when these planets, so right now they're retrograde, when they start to go direct, what is the next yellow brick?
Yep, I love it. And I think a huge takeaway for everybody listening as well is that regardless of one of the three that you fall into, may it be the rut, the rock bottom, or up level, even me, I'm in an up level. This year has actually been many forms of a next level for me. However, I've felt all of the energies you're talking about. May it be caged in, resistance, things not happening the way that I thought that they would, but deeper support. And what, just like you said in the very beginning, what it all kind of is the same energetic of is a really big magic dark. And what I always tell people in a magic dark, just as you said, when you're going through changes, the best way to navigate a magic dark, regardless of what type you're in, is to find the magic every day. So it's like, do all the things you love the most within your means. What can you do to be in your worth? You know, whatever that is, may it be meditation, workout. If you meet the magic dark or the resistance with that present, and I don't want to say happiness because I want everybody to feel their feelings, but that present beauty, that magic, the things that light you up. When you navigate with that, I find that so much more magic unfolds. The lessons become clear a lot easier and faster. And then there's usually more flow and support to get you on the other side.
So true. It's just so true. And, I also just really want to reiterate that this year is astrologically, it's a hefty one. And even if it weren't, COVID or the pandemic, this energy, if it were hitting your chart, it was going to hit your chart anyway. And so there was going to be that lesson regardless. So it's really easy to, when we're frustrated about something, to find something very particular to blame. COVID, X, Y, Z, right? But it's really an opportunity to go, okay, whatever's I'm being presented with, that core lesson was going to show up no matter what.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just having a relationship with it that we are always growing, we are always evolving. And this is an opportunity always to up level with it.
Yeah. And I mean, just to highlight the natural disasters that have happened, the unveiling of, massive injustice, or at least becoming more popularly understood, it's been hefty, but had those have not, just like you're saying, been the biggest current affairs, you still would have experienced whatever you're meant to learn. You still would have been not derailed, but you would have been guided in the direction you're supposed to go in, because we're human. And like you said, we're growing.
Yeah. If we look at this year as a year of major growth and change, and, with that Venus retrograde in Gemini is a lot about language and learning and choices and seeing things from different angles. And so we really got an opportunity this spring, when Venus was retrograde May 13th to June 25th, to really look at things from a different perspective and really think about language and the language that we use, because language shapes our reality as well. So we emerged out of that. And now with Mars, in Aries, it's like, what's our relationship to our wants, our direct, and how we go after them? Because Mars is how we go after what we want, and Aries is so direct. So what is our relationship to our own pure fire? What is our relationship to our own agency in our lives? What is our relationship to our anger? Do we repress anger? Do we utilize it? So it's like, think about what's on the other side of all of this. And astrologically, on December 17th, Saturn moves back into Aquarius. And then on the 19th, Jupiter joins in Aquarius. And on December 21st, they meet up at 0 degrees Aquarius. And there's this kind of forward movement, this expansion, this seeing things through the inner sight and the third eye. So I feel like there's such purposefulness in all of this feeling of being redirected, because we move into so much possibility on the other side, and then next year, Saturn and Uranus are going to square off. And that is, that's not deep transformational change that requires deep catharsis. It's electric change. It's being pushed up against the edge of something, so something radically new emerges.
And getting back into the Mars, that we're going to be experiencing pretty soon, How can they look forward to that? How can they harness that energy? I know there's a sitting with it, but just so that they have more awareness around it and a little bit more autonomy rather than feeling like they're under, a wave.
Yeah. Well, I do think our energetic body holds on to so much. So I think movement is key. Even if you're in an apartment, like truly dancing it out every day, like get literally moving the energy from the energetic body. I'm a big fan of screaming into a pillow. It sounds silly, but I find that moves a lot of energy. But on a deeper level, I would say if we're talking about the inner child and connecting to the inner child, like, did you feel like you had agency in your life? And if not, doing healing work around that as an inner child, how were you taught to relate to your anger? Some children have a lot of temper tantrums and their parents are like, I can't deal with this, like, get in the closet. And so what has that created in terms of your own relationship to your anger and your frustration? So I think it's actually a really powerful time to heal our relationship with these themes, which especially as women, those who are women listening, it's like, and of course this is across all genders and non-binary and all, all of that. But in terms of a lot of times women were raised with like, we don't get angry. We don't talk about that, or, we have to stuff that. And so really having a different relationship with one's own voice.
That's great. Based on everybody's individual chart, they can really check out to see where Mars hits their chart and how it's affecting different aspects of their life. Because what will it be affecting in mine again? I forget.
For you, it's the 8th house, which is other people's resources. So if you're loaning people money, or people are asking for support from you, or are you needing a loan for something, for a bigger purchase, something like that, anything that has to do with shared resources is what's coming up for you.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode. And if you haven't caught Dani's handle, go ahead and give your Instagram handle.
My Instagram handle is at Dani Beinstein.
She's done an incredible series that's just totally layman's terms to explain each of the different houses, what they represent. So if you do go and pull up your chart, which maybe, I mean, we've done this in a prior episode, and you have a whole course on this that I'll let you explain, but let's take somebody through the really quick experience. If they pull up their chart on what site, all they have to check out is Mars and seeing what house that hits. If they want to learn deeper, head to your Instagram to see what each of the houses represent, or you have the whole course that explains how to read your chart.
Exactly. And really takes your own chart through a self-investigative, deeper learning. It's really self-inquiry and self-counseling. So it's not just this is going to happen to you, but it's like, what's your relationship to this energy and then it provides tools for how to move through it.
And what site would somebody use? I use Cafe Astrology because it's really hard for me to look at a wheel.
I mean, I have my software, which I have was just time passages. But, I think astro.com or astro charts, a lot of people like astro charts because it's so pretty to look at. But cafe astrology, I know people like too. And then there's different house systems, which I've talked about too. And I actually just did a post about it. I use equal houses. But I think it's like the more you engage and understand your own chart and what's happening in the world and how that affects our energetic body, the more empowered we feel because we have a sense of context and time, and that this is all, it's all part of being human and having the human experience. And our souls, like you mentioned earlier, our souls know what they're doing. It's like we just have to quiet the mind and quiet the ego in order to be able to listen to it. And I think that's a lot of what astrology provides us.
Yeah, one very easy tool for that I've loved lately that seems so basic, but Bruce Lipton talks about it. He very much believes similar to us that, you have the imprintation of your subconscious and it's projecting, and that's what you're bringing into your life. Whatever's in your life right now is a reflection of whatever your subconscious is projecting. So he says, like, to make it very simple to see what your soul has to think about something, he's like, quiet the mind and just ask your heart. And if your heart's like yes or no, or if it just has a little bit of resistance, it doesn't mean it's a no. It just means your heart's not ready for that yet. And it doesn't even have to be a full meditation. You can just quiet your thoughts, get into your heart space and ask. And how this can pertain to somebody who maybe is considering leaving their job or considering another place to live, or is this place still correct for them? Just going off of the examples that you've seen in your practice, again, it can be that simple to just let your thoughts go and start to ask your heart more. And that's when I believe we're connecting with our soul, and our soul is starting to express the truth that can make this whole process a little bit easier.
100%. 100%. And I think also not being afraid of the grief. A lot of people are just starting to feel the grief now of what they, feel are lost experiences or plans that they had. And so also not being afraid to feel that, because on the other side of that is this feeling of freedom. There's a line that I love, which is, we can never depart a station we've never arrived at. So it's like allowing ourselves to come to this place of disappointment, of grief, so that we create the space for the new beginning and for the possibility.
Amen. With finishing out the rest of the year, is there anything else we need to know in way of any more eclipses, anything like that?
Yeah. So there are 2 more eclipses this year. One is on November 30th, and that is in Gemini. And then 2 weeks later, on December 14th, there is a solar eclipse in Sagittarius. And so we're moving into the Sag and Gemini eclipses, which started on June 5th. That was the first one. And then there's next year, May 26th and June 10th. That's our spring experience of 2021. But the Sag and Gemini eclipses are really they're about learning, and they're about both the lower mind and the higher mind, and how we take in information, how we share information, how we experience our world through language and, mental processing, but then also how we share it, our narratives, our beliefs, our perspectives, how we connect the dots in our lives. And so there's going to be a lot of movement that starts, again, with this idea of moving, that starts to emerge because we're moving out of the Cancer Capricorn eclipses, which we've been in since July of 2018, which are all about security, the inner child, parenting, how we feel parented, our relationship to our family, our relationship to emotional security, financial security, structure, establishment, achievement. Now it's about a little bit more of play. How we experience a world around us, how we relate to wonder and possibility. And Sagittarius is the lucky sign. I don't like to say that, because then it's like people are like, oh my God, I don't have Sagittarius, I'm not lucky. But it is a sign that's about optimism, and it's ruled by Jupiter.
And seems like it's not held back by material constructs.
Exactly. It's willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
It's willing to jump right in. So I think that, these eclipses are going to bring more movement, and may feel kaleidoscopic in some ways, but I think there's also something really beautiful and exciting about that, because we've been so deep in the work of Cancer and Capricorn, and then all of these outer planets in Capricorn as well. And that will start to shift at the end of this year. So I think December, we're going to start to see some real shifts in terms of both the collective and in our individual lives. Again, knowing where it's hitting your chart specifically, but I'm sure Sages and Geminis are starting to feel this energy already, or people who have strong Sag and Gemini in their chart.
And again, not to continue to break this down too intensely for people, but I think this can be the most helpful way for those who aren't extremely aware of their chart and don't know a ton about astrology, but are finding solace in this conversation and less aloneness, less sadness, knowing that there is a greater narrative happening here, greater destiny. Can we go through the months really quick, Dani? And if you just want to outline, and again, I know this isn't specific to people's chart, but an overview of that month and how one might find a little solace or tools of how to navigate that month. So just very simple, like this is the energy that could be coming up this month because of X, Y, and Z. Here are a few things I would do to roll with the punches or find my flow, starting with the end of August.
So the end of August, we move into Virgo season. And Virgo is all about decluttering, simplifying, creating efficient modes. A lot of parents who are of school-age children who are listening, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, their kids are going to be going back to school. So there's a lot of that energy for those of us, without children or with much smaller children who aren't school age. It's the idea of like, how can we declutter our minds? How can we clear our spaces? There is a full moon on September 1st, and then there is a new moon on September 17th. So for those who track that, the full moon on September 1st is in Pisces. And so that energy is kind of magical and mystical. And it's got that particular full moon has a very positive, almost like ethereal quality to it. So there can be a feeling of tapping in to the ethers. And so there's both the kind of like decluttering of the mind and then also the opening up. And then the new moon on September 17th. And then the following month, at the end of September, we move into Libra season.
And we'll have Mars, and it'll be finishing.
Oh, right. So in September, Mars goes retrograde September 9th to November 13th. So we start that experience of having Mars retrograde. But I don't think we're going to start to really feel the impact of that in the bigger way that I'm talking about until October.
So one can really like declutter their mind. So something as simple as curating your subconscious, I like to say, like recurate your feed, just really decluttering the things that are taking up space that are no longer serving you.
Exactly. And then, we move into the end of September and into Libra season, which is all about the reflection, the mirror. So we've cleared out our minds and we've decluttered and we've honed our skills and we've taken care of our tasks. And now it's like, now we meet the other in Libra season. And like I said, Libra season is going to be intense this year. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, especially between October 9th and October 20th. We do have a full moon in Aries, October 1st.
Oh, my favorite.
So we'll start to feel that that burst of energy, that feistiness, that balance between I and we. And then 2 weeks later, on October 16th, we have the new moon in Libra. So again, a focus on partnership, on the other, on reflection. At that point, October 16th, both Mars and Mercury will be retrograde. So Mercury starts off in retrograde in Libra it starts off in Scorpio and then backtracks into Libra, and then it'll go forward on November 3rd.
And during this particular retrograde pairing, what are some things people could be feeling?
I would say because it's going to start in Scorpio and we're dealing with energetics and the psyche, it's looking at almost like nonverbal communication. Again, it's really important to see where it falls in your chart, not to keep going back to this because it's going to affect each of us differently. But by and large, usually people with strong Gemini and Virgo are most impacted by Mercury retrograde just because Mercury is their ruler. But there's this feeling of going into the psyche. And it's different than like Virgo decluttering. It's more of like a going into one's sixth sense. Scorpio is known for its sixth sense. And then backtracking into Libra, it's the idea of communication in partnership, right? How we communicate in partnership.
Mm.
And then at the end of October, we move into Scorpio season. And on October 31st, so that's Halloween. There's a pretty wild full moon in Taurus, and the sun is going to be opposite. Like that one is certainly about radical change and liberation. And it's on Halloween. So that's going to be interesting.
And how would somebody, navigate that, generally speaking?
It's so hard to say now energetically because obviously so much is going to transpire. Obviously so much is happening, right? So 2 months from now, we have a lot that's going to shift in the interim. But I think that it may, here in America, just shy of the election. So I think you're going to see a lot of energy related to that in the collective. On an individual level, I think it's more what is up right now for Taurus specifically, but also Taurus and Scorpio and Leo and Aquarius. These are fixed signs. So that energy likes it the way they like it. They can be very stubborn, but that stubbornness is also their determination and how they're able to get so much done and go so far. Uranus, and then next year with Saturn squaring Uranus, this crew is in for some radical change. So that radical change can be a perspective that's like, whoa, I never thought of it like that. Or it can be literally the world around them changes, but it's really the relationship to change. Let's say you were raised in a home where everything stayed exactly the same. You may have a relationship to change that feels a little scary because you're not used to that. Conversely, if things always were changing growing up, you may be like, I can't deal with any more change. So again, like with your work, going back to the inner child and looking at one's relationship to change, because one's relationship to the unknown and change in so many ways shapes our ability to manifest and experience success because we're open to the X factor. So if we're open to the unknown, we have a positive relationship to the unknown, then we're creating the energetic space for all these opportunities to come our way. So it's really our relationship to it and our relationship to resistance.
Absolutely.
Then on November 15th, we have a new moon in Scorpio. So by that point, Mercury will be direct and Mars will be direct because Mars goes direct on November 13th. So I think that one's going to feel like, okay, I'm coming home to myself. I get to plant new seeds because it's a new moon in terms of energetics and how we show up energetically. And I personally find that Scorpio is a very magnetic sign because Scorpio energy is all about understanding energy. It's alchemical in that way. So recognizing the power of energy in that way.
Yeah, and shining the light on the darkness and bringing it to the light.
Exactly, and not being afraid of it.
Yep. And this is when we all feel like a release a little bit.
Yes. Well, again, always depends on where it's landing in your own chart.
Of course.
But yes, on the collective, for sure. I think we're going to start to feel some relief. No question. Then end of November, we move into Sagittarius season and we have the first of the two eclipses. So we have the Gemini lunar eclipse on November 30th. Again, like I was talking about, so being open to seeing things from different angles will be in a learning state of mind, right? But there's going to be a lot shifting because Gemini is all about choices and Gemini is about trying things on without getting too attached to anything. And then following that on December 14th, we have the solar eclipse in Sagittarius. And then on December 29th, we have a full moon in Cancer. And that rounds out the year. And then, like I said, December 21st, we have a meetup of energy. Jupiter and Saturn meet up at 0 degrees Aquarius. So I think, beginning with the November eclipses, yes, it may bring change, but I don't think we're not going to feel as structurally bound as we have. We're going to start to feel more movement in a more fluid way.
And when planets like Mercury, for instance, anytime Mercury is in retrograde, I always say I'm actually really prosperous during that time. And it's the shadow phases that actually affect me a lot. Do these other planets, they all have shadow phases as well?
Yeah, but they're so long. You get so into that and then you're never going to make a choice ever because you know what I mean?
Yes.
You don't want to get too much. I hear you, but Mercury is one of the fastest moving planets. So we move through that much faster.
And I think that's actually a really good note for people. I personally try to live my life like this, where I actually don't put things on hold because of the planets. I know people, they say that about Mercury. They're like, don't sign the contracts, don't do the things. And I never actually abide by any of that. I do this work during anything that's happening and I find presence and I find the lessons and the tests. And, so what do you think about that when that advice is given?
I don't follow that advice for myself.
Okay.
And I'm an astrologer. So I always trust, does it feel like it's in flow? And also you can play with the energy because If you're forcing it and jamming it, then no. But like I had a client of mine who was going to buy an apartment in New York City, and it was during Mercury Retrograde. And I said, just make sure your lawyer, I would encourage you to make sure your lawyer looks over the contract with a fine tooth comb, and that the inspections, you get the best inspector possible. And she found that there were real issues and she didn't move through with it. But had that gone swimming, I still would have encouraged her to do it if it felt like everything else was in alignment. She was moving forward with it, but then Mercury retrograde showed up in that way of making her aware of why this contract actually wasn't the right one to sign, why she shouldn't have bought the apartment.
And it really does show that shift in perspective, like that we need to really move out of the superstitious, the fear, and really start to understand that the universe, all of this is here to support us. And again, it's just here to align us back onto our most authentic whole path. Even if you're sidetracked off of that, there's divinity happening and there's magic that you're doing in the meantime using your tools or whatever your process is that's going to guide you to that space. I always think it's actually all beautiful and blessings, as I know you do as well.
I really do. The other thing that I just want to bring to the attention is I didn't mention that on August 15th, Uranus goes retrograde. Again, an outer planet. So unless you're Aquarius rising or have strong Aquarius or this hits you directly, I don't think you're going to feel it so much, but it does go retrograde until January 14th. And then Neptune, which is an incredibly slow moving planet, is retrograde, and that goes direct on November 28th. But again, these are, I think, unless you're particularly impacted by them, I don't think they'll have a huge effect. I think it's more this combo of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, and then Mars because of the aspects that it's making. Uranus next year especially we'll feel it with that Saturn-Uranus square. But I just wanted to make sure, because if there are astro wizards who are listening, that they know that that's happening too.
Yeah. And for the layman person, like myself, if you were able to get through the first 8 months of this year, you're so well equipped to deal with anything else that's coming this year. So don't hide under your bed. I don't let these things freak you out. It's just to give you a little insight of how to navigate them more accordingly. And I want to leave off on the note, what have been some awesome things you've seen your clients manifest this year? Because I've personally had so much flow still, not in the exact way that I thought it would be, and so much up leveling to the next level as I see many around me having. So I really, I want to expand people, what you've seen in your own practice.
So I've seen buying of a house. I've seen selling of a house that one had wanted to sell for a long time. I've seen pregnancy. I've seen financial abundance come in an unexpected way from clients. And I've seen falling in love during a pandemic, starting off as socially distant dating.
Same. We even have like the joke. We have one person on our team who's like had 2 relationships during the pandemic. It's like, it's all possible. I don't think any of this is here to block anyone or anything like that. You're just being guided more divinely to support where you actually really want to go and your soul wants to go and needs to go.
100%. And also it's showing us what it's like to actually live in flow, to live not in resistance, because like I'm seeing with so many of my clients having all these experiences of manifesting all these things, it's like, had they been in charge, had they been in a different circumstance, they may have tried to force something, and in letting go, they've actually seen the things show up for them.
Yeah, I love it. Are there last notes we should know?
I think it's like not really to look at fear and how fear is operating in the psyche, because I think that's the key to it all. It's like, if there's a feeling of openness, if there's a positive relationship to the unknown and to change, it's like the world's your oyster.
Truly. And I really, since I've said since the beginning, we'll have it linked below if you want to hear my energetic take on the pandemic in general and how it pertains to manifestation. You can click that link below. But the most beautiful gift that I think we're going to get out of this year, and that, as I said from the very beginning, is our trust muscle gap. When you're playing with really passing the hardest tests and really passing the magic darks, your threshold now is going to be so much greater, where you might have like run for the hills a lot earlier, gone back to the old job because whatever, the account is running out, or you're going to have such a resilience about you now, such a strong trust muscle, that the process of manifestation is going to get so much quicker because you're going to know how to navigate when things get really dicey. And you're like, no, I know this is right. I'm in my worth. I have the trust muscle to deal with this, the wherewithal. And that's what, like, I think many survivors have. And I'm not just talking about trauma survivors or what that word's used for, but survivalists. I personally have always been a survivalist. You know, I've always been in survival mode. And so that's why this process has been a little bit faster for me to understand, because I've had a bigger threshold of like jumping off cliffs and knowing my rock bottoms really deeply. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts all of us are learning from this year, is a way greater threshold of being able to truly play with the energetics of tests and magic darks.
And adaptability. And I think that's what these Sag Gemini eclipses are also going to bring, is like when we tap into our adaptability, it's the animal within us. It's actually so beautiful. There really is always possibility. And I think that's the most important thing to remember, that there is always possibility. As long as we are walking this earth, there's magic and possibility.
One of the coolest things I've also seen in people is starting to have a true understanding and look at their authentic self and their worth when many things are stripped away. That onion layer is forcefully stripped away from us. That's also adding to like tremendous magnetism. And that's been really, really beautiful to watch, in tandem to what you were saying with adaptability and getting back to our pure instinctual truth.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, Dani, tell us, okay, so I personally utilize the Inner Compass monthly. Tell us about that. And then the 2 workshops that you have at hand, like we kind of touched on earlier, and then how people can interact with your Instagram and with all of that in general if they want to develop a practice.
Yeah. So the Cosmic Compass is actually every new and full moon. There's a video, there's a meditation, there's a playlist, there's journal prompts, there's the rituals of how to partake and utilize the energy. There's a whole write-up on the energy of the new and full moon. And then that membership also includes both the workshops. So one workshop is a chakra workshop, which is a series of meditations and journal prompts all around the chakras, and then also the Intro to Astrology course. And we'll be adding transits to the Intro to Astrology. So we're adding that in, we're folding that in as well. So that's what's happening in the sky and how that relates to your own chart. And then starting in September, I'm going to start doing a live call once a month for the Cosmic Compass members. So we'll be adding and folding that in as well.
I have been calling it this whole time Inner Compass, so I apologize for that, the Cosmic Compass. And so like what I saw when I first joined that, a really cool way to navigate it is, and it's like an incredibly accessible membership, is that upon joining, it's kind of really cool, like how we do How to Manifest and Inner Child or whatever. The way I would navigate it is to first do the Intro to Astrology. So you start to really understand how to read your chart, so that when you're explaining monthly what's happening with the new and full moon, you can really see how that's impacting your chart specifically. Because during that time, you do go through these things. You go through the retrogrades, the transits. And so when you start to understand the language, which I am yet to do, that's why I'm like, this is how I want to navigate it. In fact, and I might take my time up here at the retreat house to do this. So I would do that. And then, you know, the chakra course, or going straight into the monthly work. So at the new moon, at the full moon, so that you really, really get to understand how it's affecting you directly, you know, is fantastic. And it's so cool that you're adding that live call, because that would be really powerful. I always think I have the luxury of voice noting you, and I try so hard not to.
You
do
can
it
do
at
it whenever.
like, oh my God, I'm always like, I gotta ask Dani, what in the fuck is going on right now? But that's how I would interact. And then on the daily basis, I would definitely follow you, because you have launched that really cool new series that has really taught me a lot. Specifically, you started with introducing the houses, what they mean, what's going on. So for anybody who really wants to understand this stuff further, have a little bit more autonomy over your life based on the stars and planets, I think it's a great way to start.
Yeah, and really my Instagram is just all astrological info with, some nature photos here and there.
I love it. Well, thank you for giving us your time and explaining this. And a lot of newbies are on the journey with me to really understanding. I feel like I have somewhat of an understanding of astrology, but this year has definitely showed me that I need to understand a lot more and how empowering that is.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.